the purpose of life is to learn. The purpose of life is to grow. Look at life. It's always changing. The grass, figuring out, these different trees, learning how to become different kinds of trees. It's always evolving, adapting to its environment. So thank you everybody for being here. So let's just start out by talking all right, God, first of all, who has a positive association with that word? And as I said, so this is not a religion class. Okay, I'm not in here to discuss, particulars of any religion, or we're not comparing and contrasting religions. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find something. I like what you said about everything and everyone, right? We're trying to find what are these commonalities. And of course, everyone in here is going to get to kind of make of this what you want, okay? But the point is to help you to have a better understanding for yourself and to have a deeper connection, in whatever way that is, okay? So I want to go through a couple different vantage points on that. So you mentioned Buddhism, right? So another perspective is the Daoism. Has anyone ever heard about the Tao or the Tao Te Ching? In Daoism, they talk about this idea of the Tao. And they also talk about, people have seen this symbol, right? Balance, right? Anyone know, what does this symbolize? Yin and yang, balance, the light and the dark, yeah, opposition. Yeah, and kind of that life is always giving us that. Okay, there's always some light, there's always some dark, but this line is kind of like moving all the time. What's that? Form and chaos, yeah, form and chaos. Things are kind of making sense one way one day, then they change around, okay? But in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about this idea of the Tao. And they say the Tao is formless. It's basically a lot of paradoxes. The Tao is formless, but has form. It's in everything. It's underlying everything. It's the law that directs everything, right? But it's not thought about as like God or a person or something, but it is this philosophy of what's being observed in nature. So it's not something that happened in the past. It is, but it's also something that's happening right now. What would this say if you take what you were just saying, bro? If you tie that back to the sense of a higher power or God. So where is God then? Is it them, he, she, whatever? Is it in the past only, or where is God acting? All the dead people. Okay, so are you telling kind of some sort of collective intelligence or something? You mentioned dead people like ancestors. So you think about all of those as part of God. For example, in Hawaiian culture, which is an indigenous culture, right? If you look at most indigenous cultures from around the world, they're going to have different gods, a bunch of different gods, right? That represent energies in different places, in the mountains, in the sea, in the ocean. Specific gods for a specific place, okay? So in the past, that caused a lot of problems. People went and killed people, right, about that, right? I think today we can kind of see it more in harmony. For you guys, connecting with a higher power is also, in a certain way, it's connecting with ancestry, connecting with ancestors, connecting with place of where you came from, people and land, possibly too, right? Where do you come from? So that could be part of your understanding of God, of a higher power. I think one of the things I want to emphasize in this conversation, guys, is that it's kind of all a mystery. We know a lot of things we learn from science, or there's other ways of knowing things too, more spiritual ways of knowing things. But really, most traditions, even if you have an understanding of God, a big part of it is just having reverence for it, because you don't know. It's something that's so powerful that you can't comprehend it. And even in science, you take your example, right? Okay, Hawaiians came from Tahiti, came from Taiwan. That's one of the theories, right? But then where did those people come from? And then where did the humans come from? And where did the planet come from? And so we are always updating our science, but we tie it back to a Big Bang. That's the closest, that's the best thing we have right now, right? Where did that come from? We don't know. So that's what I mean is beyond that, we can all speculate. We can think it's fun to think about it, but it's mysterious. Okay, so beyond that, it also gives you another framework of thinking about a higher power. Where did all this originate from? How did it exist? This topic might be stimulating to do in different ways. You might find it boring. You might find it there's people of different religious perspectives in this room. And usually when you talk about God, that will always be the case. Okay? So you have to have we all need to try to be open and have some curiosity, have some respect for everyone has their own experience, right? And so, but if we share, then we can all learn more together. Again, ultimately, like, what is this about, right? Again, this is not a religion class. Everyone can have their own religion coming into this class, but it's about you. It's about your relationship with life, right? And I'm going to lay down a couple things when we think about God. People, you talked about the circle of life. You said nature, right? And so there's certain elements, I think, that we can kind of understand and relate to kind of a straightforward way. It doesn't have to be part of some big religious story that can help us to make healthy choices or to feel supported when we're feeling emotionally overwhelmed. That's where this idea or this concept of a higher power becomes really helpful. What I heard you say is that, God is not necessarily something you resonated with. You were carrying a lot of darkness, as you said, but you saw in your friends, in your community, light. You saw something genuine inside them, and it inspired you to get to a place of surrender or opening yourself up. And then you had your own experience of that too. I'm going to write down infinite love. We didn't put infinite up here or love. We show up in a positive way for ourselves, for the people in our life. How do we take care of the earth, the planet around us? How do we share love? Yeah. How do we have respect for each other? Yeah. A lot she shared. I think there's a lot there. The ego death, spiritual awakening. And yeah, and how does it translate? It's like fun to talk about these kind of philosophies. What does it mean for and how you live your life? Yeah, I think, it's interesting about the word spirituality. It's a nice word because it's a little different from religion. So it lets you kind of distinguish. But it also sometimes makes it feel like spirituality is some woo-woo thing, out there. I'm going to connect with some energy or something, right? But what you're talking about there is about learning, right? Really our sense of perspective in life, our sense of spirituality is really based in just all our experiences, our just everyday, ordinary human experiences. What makes you who you are? That's informing your understanding of the moment. That is part of your spirituality. That's part of your connection, right? Yeah, no one else can do it for you, right? Our own personal experience. So no one else. And we're also talking about learning. So learning and experience shapes us. I had one spiritual teacher who told me tell his students that the purpose of life is to learn. The purpose of life is to grow. Look at life. It's always changing. The grass, figuring out, these different trees, learning how to become different kinds of trees. It's always evolving, adapting to its environment. The first is we talked about this idea of creator, right? And take it lightly because we don't know. We just don't know. It's a mystery, right? But it says in the Bible, it says that that we were created in the Creator's image. Okay, we're created in God's image. Does anyone have any idea, what does that mean for us to be created in God's image? Yeah, so it's easy to go from here to be then God is maybe a person or something, right? So there's this, on the one hand, this idea of God or the mystery of nature, it's way, way, way beyond us. It's our higher power. It's something bigger than us, right? But at the same time, actually, each of us, humanity, we're created like that. Okay, we have the capacity to do good things. We have the capacity to do good things. And I like to focus on this idea of creating, right? So created in His image, creative process. It means you are also creative. Okay, you can take what you learn and you can apply it. You can think creatively about how do I want it to look? How do I want my life to be? How do I want to show up and shape it? Okay, so that's one thing I like to think about. Is that each of you is creative, each of us. So if I'm finding a relationship with a higher power, right? It's surrender, like you said. I'm turning myself over to that higher power. But there's also kind of a collaboration, right? It's okay, I'll work with you. You talked about effort, right? Okay, I'll put the work in to find you, right? But another way to think about it is hey, how could we collaborate creatively on life? What do you want to do? God or Creator or Bob or whatever you're going to call him, her, right? Whatever it is. What are we trying to create here? And how could I be part of that? How could I get creatively involved with that? Okay? So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is just that this is the Hebrew of the name of God in Hebrew. Okay? So that's the original language of the Bible, right? So this is the name of God. The name of God is just a bunch of permutations of the verb to be. Okay, so this is like basically like past, present, and future of the verb to be. That is God. That's the name of God. Okay, and they don't use the be to be verb like I am, right? So anyone in like roots reggae or reggae music, right? I am that I am, right? I am that I am, right? That is another way to think about God. Is everything, you talked to the very beginning about everything and everyone, everywhere. Okay, God. If you look at it from this, if this is to be, then God is everything, right? God is life. God is this whole experience manifesting itself, transforming itself, becoming new things. Okay? So I share these things with you guys. Again, it's not a religion class, right? This is just so that hopefully it's useful for you when you're thinking about in your process of your recovery. How am I connecting with a higher power? You take all of this, all these different things we're talking about, try to distill it into like how that makes sense for you. What does that really make sense? So it's not some big abstract idea of something that doesn't resonate for you or doesn't speak to you, but it's something personal and meaningful. Hey man, that's a whole interesting topic. There's some people out there who think that, this whole idea of like the second coming or like the return of Christ is really about humanity manifesting its kind of God-like abilities, and it's our abilities to communicate instantly with one another or to have a collective intelligence around the planet. So, depends on your viewpoint. Think about all the craziness we've seen just since we had like smartphones, 15 years ago, and now it's bananas, right? So yeah, right? Again, so like God, religion, it's like it involves nature, it involves technology, it involves evolution, right? All those pieces are part of this conversation. It's a contradiction. It's a mystery, right? Because if we're creative, if we're partners in that creation, then yeah, mankind's creations are also believed to be part of God, but there's different viewpoints on it. We have downsides. We have ways that we can become selfish and not really be thinking about the overall benefit. So we kind of have to work on that. If we're going to have the ability to blow up the world collectively, if each of you guys in here has the ability to kind of like screw up your life big time, right, through addiction and get it back on track, right? You have that ability. Right? So that's that empowerment that goes along with having this connection with a higher power. So one of the themes I'm hearing there is about communication, right? So we're talking about communicating, because we didn't have time to get into it totally today, but another part of this conversation is like, okay, big deal. Okay, here's all this idea, but how do you connect? So, and that connection has to do with communication, right? The relationship. Right, so there's a lot of details to that. We can keep exploring that, but how do you actually connect? Yeah, so that's a whole other perspective, right? Like strengths-based psychology. Let me focus on what you're really good at. Let's talk about that. And let me encourage you. Let me give you positive information, because if you keep doing that, then you start getting stronger and stronger. So all this is a metaphor, right? So we think about this with our communication with our kids or with other people, but this is also, again, it's about the communication between you and God, right? You and the higher power. So how do you want God to talk to you, right? So that's one of the things I want to communicate. It's not necessarily like you're just receiving some top-down, sometimes if people have really like strong, kind of more vindictive, negative experience of God, think about what your relationship is with your parents, or how did your parents talk to you? Sometimes that's how we imagine God talking to us. But when you're getting older, you realize it's actually a two-way street. What kind of communication am I creating with life, with this higher power? How do I want them to talk to me? How do I want to talk to them? And what might we be able to do together? Right? Motherly, fatherly, there's different parenting styles, different parenting techniques. One thing that I think it does lift up, and then I'll come to you guys, is this idea of compassion and respect. Because there's not just one way. There's certain things like, 1 + 1 = 2, B follows A, things like that. But like, when things like something as complicated as life, there's not really one right way to do it. Same with your guys' recovery. There's not one right way to do it, but it has to work. It has to be something that you can be honest with yourself about, that starts to make sense, actually makes some difference for you. A lot of this comes back to learning, right? And communication, because there's a lot of different ideas that were normal about this is the way to be a good parent 100 years ago or a generation ago, and they change. So a lot of people these days would not see it that way. Would see that that's not a good thing, right? There's an old saying in Chinese culture. It says, what seems like a blessing may be a curse, and what seems like a curse may be a blessing. You know, so it's nice to not get disciplined, and but then maybe that has some consequences that you didn't think, right? It might seem like you have to discipline a child. We had the Tao up here before, right? So things change. There's the rainy season and the dry season. What I just want to invite everyone to think about as you're going out from here is like, okay, so what does it mean for me? Okay, we talked about a lot of ideas, but where's me? Where's my relationship with a higher power, with life, with nature, with God, and how can it help me in my recovery? Where could it improve? And it can definitely, regardless of what you believe, I 100% believe that whatever relationship that you're having with yourself and with life, it can improve. It can improve. You can work on that. Okay, so I wish you guys all the best. Thank you for your excellent participation, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, thank you guys.